And like we were discussing, I mean, you like surprises. So first of all, let me surprise you that the number which Hina just gave, India has more than 1.4 lakh startups right now. And obviously we are very proud of it because we are the third largest startup ecosystem in the world. We also have 1.4 billion people. So when you compare 1.4 lakh startups to 1.4 billion people, how do you look at it?
Yeah, I got a nice, pleasant surprise in the speaker lounge also. I met one of my childhood favorites. I'm a fanboy of Jonty Rhodes, and I met him there.
He's going to be here soon, yeah.
Thank you for that. That's a very compelling number. And obviously, anyone who's learned their mental math, that means there's one startup for 10,000 people. But the reality is that's not entirely true because I think our success rate of startups, like anywhere in the world, is low. That number might be, 1 to 2%, which is very normal. The VCs won't tell you this, but normally 1 to 2% of all companies that start or startups actually become large, successful companies. But in itself, 1.4 lakh startup is a tremendous number. And I don't think India would have got to this number if, the last decade or so, the kind of stuff that has been put in place, the platform that's been provided for startups, I have to say has been commendable. Many of us will remember Startup India. Now we've had many versions of that, but I was involved with the first one. I was actually the moderator, and I really enjoyed that because it was for the first time, I think, government recognizing India as a startup nation, saying startups are important. They have a very important place in our ecosystem, and let's give them that positioning. And that got followed up with, I think, a lot of breaks on the regulatory side, tax benefits followed for, and then, fund of fund for startups. So I think we got a slew of measures. But for me, the single biggest turning point for startups in India, and I'm biased towards the tech side, has been UPI. I think UPI is something which we can call it the India financial stack or digital public good, is the backbone of our entire e-commerce industry, our entire fintech industry. And many of us travel around the world, and I think we have great pride in saying that our fintech industry is probably number one in the world. I don't think there we have to say we are number 3. The way UPI works seamlessly, and I think we have to give a lot of credit to everyone who worked it. Obviously, it's a government public good. Nandan was deeply involved, Mr. Nandan Nilekani, who, is someone I really admire. He was deeply involved with it, and I think we really provided something on the back of which we can just build so many businesses. And we've seen it. Some of our very large businesses have been built on, could not have existed without UPI. And today we all know that it has democratized both e-commerce and fintech. We saw that during COVID. When people could not, meet people, but you had to exchange payments. Suddenly we had from 8-year-old kids to, 90-year-old nonagenarians doing e-commerce. And most importantly, people who probably don't know, who are not educated at all, but they are comfortable doing, their payment. They can easily transfer money from one phone number to another, forget a bank account. So I think that's tremendous. So India, I think we've got the building blocks in place. And that's the good news. And I think the new breed of startup entrepreneurs are getting just with no vested interest except some advice. And mostly the advice is what not to do. So at least save them a few years of going down the wrong direction, which I might have made many mistakes. And I have no doubt in saying that the new crop of entrepreneurs coming up are definitely wiser, smarter, more mature, more evolved, and more, I think, risk-taking and ambitious than, let's say, my time, which was over 20 years ago.
Right. In fact, you almost cued me for my next question. When you started Make My Trip, it was a completely out-of-box idea for a country like India, which was still, 20 years ago, not so well connected. People used to depend on travel agents. People used to depend on, physically people used to go and buy railway tickets and things like that. I think you triggered first wave of innovation as far as online businesses are concerned. Now we are in a situation where we constantly keep hearing about, the great benefit of platforms like Bheem and UPI. and so many startups coming up every day, most of them failing, some of them doing really well. The real issue is, are we innovating enough in the startup space? What is going to be that next wave of innovation which can actually create, many more startups and many more jobs? Because ultimately that's what we need, to sustain the growth and actually fast track to top 3.
Yeah, you've triggered many thoughts. You said some buzzwords. So yes, we are today a 24-year-old company, but I love to tell people in the company, all new joiners, we have to think like a 24-year-old startup. So the day we stop thinking like a startup, I think might become the beginning of the end. And the other very interesting word you used was many will fail. I think it's okay to fail, and I think we should not be too fussed about that word. The learning that we get from failures is the key thing. So every failure in our business, especially when you're a startup, you have a new business model, you're trying something, you're putting everything behind it, all your resources, all your time, all your effort. Only 6 months or 12 months or sometimes 2 years down the line will you realize this is not working. I think the best companies are those who are willing to learn from the breadcrumbs left behind of that so-called failure. Why did we fail? What did we do wrong that caused this, or did the market change? And the smart companies are able to quickly pivot and to say, listen, we've still got something great going. So we still have a great team. We still might have great technology. We understand this customer segment very well. We are catering to them. Our product needs tweaking. Or sometimes our product is great, but we are hitting the wrong customer segment, or technology has changed, we have to adapt. So I think if you're willing to learn from your so-called failures, you'll become a very smart company. Coming to your most important question, which is, are we innovating enough? I think we could do much better. And I'll tell you where and why we don't probably innovate enough. Firstly, Indians by and large, I think, and Indian businesses, I should say, don't take a very long-term approach to innovation, which is research and development. Typically, R&D, we have looked westwards towards the US, and US really, really invests a lot in R&D. I think that needs to change. And I think we have a great opportunity with AI today. Obviously, AI is the future, is today almost, it's reality today, but the future is going to change. I personally believe the impact of AI is going to be no less than the internet 1.0 and what it did to all businesses, including us, or smartphone, or 4G, 5G. So I think it's going to be tremendous in and we can talk more about it if we have the time. So this is a great time to invest in R&D for AI, R&D for blockchain, to deeply understand this, to train our people. I was delighted to hear, I just met Mr. Vineet Jain and we were chatting, and he said that Bennett Coleman Institute actually has an AI school. That is tremendous. That is really 2 steps ahead. And I'm not saying it because I'm here on your platform. I was really happy to hear that. I just heard it. So I think that is what all colleges across have to say, that this is the new technology. Let us invest enough on this. And for companies and research companies particularly, I think we have to give long-term incentives. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. If you don't incentivize research and you don't reward research, which means you take a much longer lens. If we're not going to do that, we are not going to get the kind of companies. And we'll always be copying more than having the core IP. So I think for us to move, I love your theme, fast track to 3. We should dream of being 1, and for that we'll have to innovate much more. We'll have to invest in R&D, and from policy point of view, I think we'll have to give more incentives out there.
Right. Deep, I have always wondered, if we look at the existing, I would say, MNCs in India, and when I use the word MNC, what I mean is Indian MNCs. There are so many business conglomerates who are like operating in, almost in all continents, right? But most of them are actually in, I won't use the word traditional, but at least brick and mortar sort of businesses, right? We are still not producing, let's say, at least right now, probably something on the lines of Google or Meta or even Tesla for that matter. At some point, we'll have to start doing that if we want to sustain this growth, create enough jobs. We are still a young nation. And actually speaking, 7% may not be enough to sustain this kind of population. Probably at some point we'll have to aim for double digit, settle somewhere between 9 and 10% GDP. How do we do that?
Yeah, I wish I had all the answers, but I am totally in your camp. And what makes it even more ironic, Mihir, is the fact that Indians who studied in India, who were born in India, who studied in India, are the ones at the helm of many of these path-breaking companies. So we obviously know Microsoft and Google, but there are at least 20 other companies today that are led by Indians who actually studied in India. So we clearly have the most critical asset, which is we have the talent pool. That's not lacking. We have the market, like you said up front. We have 1.4 billion people. There's no dearth of market, and our middle class is growing faster than any other middle class. So consuming class here is massive. So everyone wants to come here as their next big market. There's not one big company in the world who doesn't have their eyes set on India. And do we need to do the reverse? Yes, and I don't think it's just a flex. We have to first do well for our own market and have Indian solutions. But the solutions that work for India can definitely be taken to most of the developing world, as we should. As a company, I can tell you we made our first serious foray 3 years ago in the Middle East, actually in the entire GCC world with an Arabic platform, because we realized that there's a lot of natural traffic we are getting from there. But we haven't done our job in India. So you'll have to parallel process. On the other hand, we have companies which are providing world-class service in India. I think Indigo as an airline is probably one of the finest low-cost airlines in the world. We might still get upset when, things, but it's a great airline. And I've flown low-cost airlines in Europe and in the US, and I can tell you we are treated much better. So I think there are many other companies like this, our food companies. We have a simple company like Haldiram has become a monster. We can take that technology and we can take that anywhere in the world. So I think it's a question of our aspirations. I have to point out, B2B we have done very well. So if you look at TCS and you look at Infosys, we compete with the best companies in the world, and Wipro. Don't want to leave anyone out. We compete with the best. Today, a company like Zoho is the best in its field around the world. So I don't think there's a problem on B2B. B2C requires a very different mindset. You have to understand the market. You have to immerse yourself in that market. You can't transfer what has worked here automatically somewhere else. So I think the B2C mindset, unless you're a pure play, and you mentioned Google. Google's a pure play company, so that technology can pervade everywhere else. WhatsApp or platforms like Meta and Facebook, etc. These are pure plays. But the moment you get into companies which are physical companies in B2C world, I think understanding local markets is a very important part, and one step at a time. So I think we should pick certain markets where we have a right to succeed, go there first before we want to take on the world.
Right. Deep, if you were to launch a startup today, you launched, like you said, Make My Trip is a 24-year-old startup. But let's assume you were 24-year-old today, or maybe 20 years old, and you were thinking of, doing a startup. What kind of shape, size, and sector it would be in?
Well, size is easy. All startups start small, which is good. You should start small. I think AI, like I said, is the game changer, and it's not a great secret. But if you're not deeply invested in that and disrupting whatever you're trying to disrupt using AI, then I think you're making a mistake. I think solving some unique India problem would be the key. Again, just to allude to my last point, massive market, especially when we go beyond the metros. There are a lot of problems which are still not solved. I mean, today the biggest problem for all of us sitting in NCR is clearly the quality of air we breathe. Now, we can't always say this is a problem which, the government's going to solve. Maybe you have to work with. So maybe you want to tackle that. I think the next biggest problem, and like I said, when I was chatting with John T, we were talking really about wellness and health. And that is, going to be the biggest trend going forward. And, I think Indians are waking up to the fact. But I'd like to be, I think, focused on that sector with an approach using technology, using AI, probably in the health and wellness sector. I think there's a lot to be done out there. And when I say health and wellness, it's physical and mental health and wellness. Yeah.
Right. You mentioned AI, and I really want to understand this from you. India is obviously one of the youngest countries in terms of workforce, right? We need to create enough jobs. We also need to create right kind of jobs. Today, I see so many people, youngsters, who are probably, due to aggregator model, working in some or the other company or startup where they are probably working for a couple of hours a day, earning a few $1,000. I don't know how long it can sustain, first of all, that job, and obviously the company also. But the bigger question is, if AI is going to play such a big role, what happens to the job market? Because everybody cannot afford studying AI. Everybody cannot afford and wait to, sort of fully understand AI, then sort of get a job and all. So what happens to the job market?
Yeah, you're spot on. I think our what we talk about our demographic dividend, and we very proudly talk about it. India's, one of the youngest populations in the world, can quite scaringly flip into becoming a demographic liability if we don't actually create enough jobs for the skill sets that we have. So, and I always say this is the one big threat that we have. Certain kind of jobs are getting replaced. Today, AI plus robotics is taking over a lot of jobs. And I had this debate the other day with very interesting panel at a different forum. And I said, I think this is our big threat factor. And I was happy to hear the response that also came that, listen, we are a very disaggregated kind of workforce. And we don't have these massive factories that are there maybe in China today or in US today. And so we have smaller plants in various places. And therefore, there is still scope and room for the next 10, 20 years for humans to play a very big part in it. I think we shouldn't sit back and just say that is the last word. I think we'll have to create more jobs for our quasi-qualified youths who are coming out. Because the most dangerous thing that can happen is you have a lot of youths who've come out, have degrees in their hand, have college degrees in their hand, and they don't get jobs or they don't get meaningful jobs. So I think we'll have to think much harder on that. And again, and there will be jobs on that. It's not like there won't be. I think, if you look at in agriculture and you look at in construction and you look at in infrastructure, there are a lot of places, there are jobs where we will definitely need lots and lots of people, also in certain kind of services. I'm partial again to the travel and tourism sector. And the beauty of the travel and tourism sector is today it contributes almost 10% of India's workforce jobs. The service element of travel and tourism essentially will still remain person to person. Especially when we talk about hospitality, we still need the personal connect. You can have back-end systems which empower you, enable you to do more. Today we can breeze through the airports with Digi Yatra, again a wonderful public good that we have. But that's only a very small part of the workforce. The bulk of the workforce, whether it's in hospitality, in restaurants, in food, in our crafts, is still people. So I think we should play up a lot of those. We have crafts coming from every corner of the country, and we have to play those up. And those are not going to get replicated by AI, hopefully not, soon.
One last question, Deep. What would be your advice to today's youth who's probably trying to launch a startup, trying to do something on their own? What would be your advice to them?
Yeah, this is something I tell all youngsters that I meet. I think the first thing is, what problem are you trying to solve? I think you have to spend a lot of time thinking very hard about the problem you're trying to solve, not just getting into one particular area because it sounds cool, it sounds sexy, we get into this, we try to get funding. Getting early stage funding, angel funding is not an end in itself. It's just a means to the end. Sometimes it can be actually your biggest foe because it can give you upfront some money. You get distracted, you start listening to your investors, you're building something which is far away from your original dream. So stay true your original dream. Think about the problem you're trying to solve. Think about India problems. Why? Because then you have a moat. You have a natural moat where the big MNC companies can't come and take your market because they haven't thought about India problems, which is totally fine. So think about real India problems. I think have a very good founding team, whether it's one founder, two founders, three. I think the right number is probably two with complementary skills, but different companies have shown different formats work. Find that team and then the expanded team who are willing to commit to the long run. That's the most important thing. Be ready to commit to 4 to 5 years. Nothing great got built overnight. If you start panicking and looking back in 2 years, you'll probably see nothing. And if you don't see green shoots, you'll panic. So only get into startup if you're ready to commit 4 or 5 years. Then you will probably see something, the starting of a decent business. And then, of course, you can double down. And, ultimately, it's the most satisfying thing you can do. But this would be my simple blueprint of doing it right.
That's very interesting. One last question, Deep. Our theme is fast track to top 3, and we are referring to the largest economies in the world. but we are already third largest when it comes to startup ecosystem.
Yeah.
So what will it take for India to become the largest startup ecosystem in the world?
And we can. Firstly, I don't think it's a pipe dream. We can because we are fundamentally an entrepreneurial nation. If we all look back, one or two generations, most of our people, we'll find our forefathers and all were fairly entrepreneurial in nature. If you go beyond the big metro, you go beyond the 5 metros, you'll find most people involved in entrepreneurial activity. So we have it in our DNA, we have it in our blood. We like to say that, whether it's Gujaratis or Marwadis, they have it in their blood, or Sindhis or Baniyas, they're all different Indian communities who are just fundamentally very good business people. So I definitely think there's no dearth of human capital to do it. I think it comes back to the earlier point we made that we need that ecosystem to be built. I like to take the example of Y Combinator, which I think did a great job. And they did a great job. Why? They built an ecosystem of startups. Very often, they became each other's first customers. And that's very important. Because if you're a startup and you're trying to sell to a big company in the B2B space, you're disadvantaged. Because most big companies are saying, hey, we're only going to give what have you done before? Now, if you're a startup, you've not done anything before. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't get a chance. So to create this network and a big ecosystem, I have to speak about TIE here. I think TIE, the Indus Entrepreneurs, you're familiar with them. I'm very, very close. It's a not-for-profit. And that is the kind of ecosystem we are trying to build, where we have companies who are willing to help each other. So I think we have to do that on a massive scale. And that will really help us and really explode the startup thing, and then more investment in R&D. I think that's critical.
Great. So let's hope that happens soon. Thank you so much, Deep, for joining us on this platform. Thank you once.
My pleasure. My pleasure.